We're going to take a look at building a PC from scratch, and also along the way some of the troubleshooting steps you might want to perform as you're assembling the machine. Now, these procedures will also apply to anybody who's upgrading a system. For example, although we're building the machine from the ground up, if you are replacing a motherboard, a lot of the things we'll do here will be appropriate. And if you're having a problem with the system that's completely dead, some of the troubleshooting steps that we'll perform here will be very useful to you also. Now, I've assembled all of the components I'm going to need to build this PC on the table in front of me. A couple of the main things are the case and the motherboard. And these come with a lot of different accessories you'll need, such as cables, screws, clips, I/O shields, and all that are necessary when assembling the machine. So if you get the case and motherboard, lay out all of the parts. It helps to sometimes sort out the screws. There are often screws with different threads and depths and things like that. I've got my screws assorted into various piles here, for example, so it'll make it easy to select the right ones as I put things together. Now, the first thing we're going to do is actually install the motherboard into the tray that holds the motherboard in the case. Now, the type of case I'm using comes from a company called PC Power and Cooling. And one of the nice things about this case is that the motherboard mounts to a metal tray which comes completely out of the case. This makes installing the motherboard a lot easier because I can install it on this tray out in the open without the sides of the case or anything in the way. Now, in order to prepare the tray for your motherboard, you need to get the motherboard, take it out of its anti-static bag, and you need to look at the screw holes that are on the motherboard so that you can, which are used to secure it to the case or the tray. Now, what I did in advance is I made sure that I had the appropriate standoffs in the right positions to match the holes on the motherboard. Now, the standoffs I'm referring to are these little brass pieces here. These came with the case. Normally, this type of hardware will be included with the case. And they simply thread into all of these various holes you'll see, for example, on this motherboard tray. Now, different boards have different sizes and things, so that's why you see a variety of holes here. You just install the standoffs that match your board. Now, in some boards or cases, such as this one of the standoffs slips into a little notch here, or is kind of like sort of the final one, and it helps secure the board to the case. So that one I'm going to show installing separately. All right, I'm ready to put this board in here, and I'm going to lay it down on top of these standoffs and make sure everything lines up. Okay, all of the screws line up. Now this sort of odd one out here, I'm going to use one of these plastic standoffs that came also with the case and insert it into the hole here. And I'm going to sort of twist it, which locks it into place. And this will provide support for that corner of the board. And I'm going to set it back down again, make sure everything lines up, and select the correct screws to attach the case to this plate. Now, I'm noticing these screws here are a Phillips type screw. Normally, I don't like to use Phillips screws to secure a motherboard because the screwdriver can tend to walk out of the screw while you're tightening it. The preferred type of screw would probably be a hex head screw, something that you use a nut driver for. But since this is what we have, this is what we'll work with. Now, I normally use an electric screwdriver when I assemble a PC, and it does make the job go faster, but I hesitate to use an electric screwdriver when attaching screws to the motherboard, especially when it's a Phillips screw like this. What will happen is if the electric screwdriver jumps out of the screw and then walks along the motherboard, well, basically you'll gouge the circuitry on the board and probably ruin it. So anyway, I have a standard Phillips screwdriver here, and I'm going to begin installing the screws into these standoffs. I usually like to put them all in loose and then go through them again and tighten them down so we don't overstress the alignment here of the board. It helps in some cases to use your finger alongside the screwdriver as you're tightening it because, again, we don't want this Phillips screwdriver to walk out of the screw head. Believe it or not, there is actually a torque specification for these screws, but I haven't brought out the torque wrench, so we'll just have to do this by feel. Okay, I think we've got all of the screws tight. So now the board is secured to the tray.